Part 1. The Messenger. Mr. Charlie Black was not good at making decisions. It wasn't the fact that he couldn't make them, but rather that if he felt he made the wrong one, things would go terribly for him. Despite this fact, however, he had acquired the ownership of a popular bookstore named Page's. It was located on a busy street corner in the city he lived, and he was able to make a good living out of the place. He was reasonably nice to the customers, making good chit-chat when they would come up to the counter to either pay for something or to simply ask information on a book. He would do what he could for them, and the customers would be on their way. Charlie was happy living a life like that. He could make his own work hours, read as much as he liked in his free time, check out the newest works from the newest authors. But the thing he treasured most about owning the place was that he didn't have to make many decisions. His world was simple. He didn't have a wife, no children. His parents had passed away and he was an only child. He didn't have to be forced into anything he didn't want to, and he mostly kept to himself. He lived that life for 62 years, from the day he was born up until a week before his 63rd birthday on November 7th, 2013. That day, a week before his birthday, that was the day that he made the most important decision of his life. It was during a lunchtime break. He had turned the sign around on the door to closed and was now sitting back in the chair behind the counter, reading a furniture magazine. He was about halfway through it, thinking about his table situation at home and trying to avoid another decision, when he heard the familiar sound of the bell on the door ring out across the room, as if somebody was coming into the shop. "We are closed. We'll be back in half an hour." The old man said this without looking up from the page and turned to the next one. When he didn't hear the door opening again, he lowered the magazine slightly and glanced in the direction of the door. "Hello? We are closed. The store isn't open again for another half hour. I'm just on my lunch break." Charlie couldn't see whoever it was that had come in from the angle he was sitting on, since the door was blocked by a bookcase, but he knew somebody was there and was clearly ignoring him. He sighed, brought his legs down off the desk, and got up out of the chair, grabbing his cane on the way past the desk. He stopped when he passed the bookcase, ready to block the way into the store and tell the person that he would be glad to serve them once he returned to business. He was baffled to see that nobody was standing there. Scratching his head, he tried to figure out why the sound had rung out. When he couldn't, he figured that somebody in the street had fallen against it. He walked up and looked out of the glass pane built into the door. He could see nothing. He was about to pass it off as something that he heard his imagination when he suddenly heard a chuckle. Walking as fast as he could back out into the main shop, Charlie looked around for the source of the noise. He could see nothing that was out of the ordinary. All the books on the shelves had not been disturbed, no books on tables had been opened. Everything seemed normal. "I must be going mad." He had almost got to the end of the thought when the laughter sounded once more, and this time, he looked up towards the shelves. He was just in time to see a dark figure move at speed from one part of the store to the other. "Who's there?" It meant the words to come out as broad and confident, but instead they ended up sounding his age, a fearful wheeze of a question. He wasn't surprised either. He had had his fair share of confrontation when he was younger, but that was in the day when he could move. He could spring into action at the drop of a hat. These days he was a frail soul, his bones threatening to break at the slightest force. "I'm warning you, don't make me call the police." As if I'm gonna call the police. Probably wouldn't even get over there before I got knocked out. His thoughts were right, but he kept that part to himself for a reason. All right, jeez, calm down, man. No need to call the cops." The voice of the intruder finally spoke, and as the man looked over to where he had heard the voice coming from, he heard the sound of a lighter opening and the flame being flicked on. "You get out of my store now, and don't come back, you hear me?" There wasn't an answer for a couple of seconds, and Charlie was ready to start moving over to the phone. He stopped dead in his tracks as the intruder emerged from his hiding place. "You want me to leave? You haven't even heard what I got to say. Give me a chance, man, come on." The thing standing before the old man took a minute to sink in. What had come into the store wasn't a man. It wasn't some robber waiting in the shadows to club him and take the money. It was a goblin. A small grey goblin. Ears protruded from the top of its head. The skin on its arms looked rough and scaly, and the eyes were a dark green color. What stood out the most, however, was that the creature was wearing normal clothes. A black dress shirt with sleeves rolled up. The shirt was accompanied by a loosely tied white tie. The bootleg jeans which covered his legs gave way to the black Converse All-Stars, and the creature, it was smoking. The old man could only stand there looking down at it, his mouth hanging open. "What are you looking at? Is there something on my face?" The creature took the cigarette out of its mouth as it spoke, and outstretched its free hand in equestrial nature. "No, nothing, it's just... you're wearing clothes." Charlie had other questions for the thing, but he couldn't think of anything else to say at that moment. "Yeah, I'm wearing clothes. Would you rather I was naked? 'Cause I can get undressed if you want to, although I don't think you'll like what's underneath the covers." A small laugh escaped the creature, and when he finished speaking he put the cigarette back in his mouth and turned, heading away from the old man and towards the counter. "Oh, by the way," it was almost as if it was an afterthought. "Sorry about the chuckle. I kinda had this thing when I like to scare people before I talk to them. Yeah, I'm an asshole, I know. But hey, I was born to do it. What do you expect?" The man opened his mouth, and a few more words escaped into the open. "You're a goblin." "Yeah." "You're wearing clothes." "That's right." "And you have a Cockney accent." "All of us come from somewhere, buddy." The goblin turned away from Charlie again, but stopped in his tracks as another sentence escaped the old man's throat. "This is impossible, you're a mythical creature." The thing immediately turned with a look of anger on its face. "Hey, don't start with that racist shit. Listen, does this look mythical to you?" The cigarette returned to the mouth of the thing, and in its place, a finger was raised among the others. It was hard to tell because the thing had one less digit on each hand, but Charlie was certain that the goblin was flipping him off. The hand lingered in position for a few seconds, then the creature lowered it, turning and speaking again. "The name is Derek." "Derek the Goblin. Got it." Charlie said this as he started following the goblin. The shock that had first gripped him had worn off a little, but he was still wary of what this thing's motives really were. The two of them got to the desk, and Derek made his way around to the other end, climbing up into the chair and adjusting the height so that he was able to see over the desk. The old man was left standing there. "Well, take a seat, why don't you?" As the words came out of his mouth, the creature raised his left hand and clicked his fingers. A black desk chair appeared in a puff of smoke behind Charlie, and he was yet again shocked. But before he could have his say on this particular factor, the creature outstretched his hand, gesturing him to sit down. Charlie did as he was told, although letting himself get comfortable in the chair was another thing altogether. "Okay, let's see. First item on the agenda." As the creature finished saying this, he outstretched both his hands. Within an instant, a pen appeared in his right hand and a clipboard in his left, both producing smoke out of thin air. He lowered both his hands and put the clipboard in front of him on the desk, then scanned the page. Charlie was hesitant to ask the question, but he had to know. He needed the knowledge whether this thing in front of him was going to kill him, eat him, take his soul, or anything else that would end in him suffering for eternity. He opened his mouth and spoke the words before his mind could tell him to hesitate. "Do you work for the devil?" The reply from the creature was simple, no change in the tone of his voice, and no looking up from the paper. The only movement was the one which took the cigarette out and put it out on the desk. "The devil? Nah, that guy's a dick." The old man was shocked at the answer and grew fearful with every passing word. If this thing truly worked for some sort of demon, surely insulting the leader meant that something would be sent after this goblin. Insulting Satan wasn't exactly the best idea. Derek continued his words. "He wouldn't give me a flat screen TV in my room when I asked for it. Also, I'm not that wrapped in his whole obsession with fire." "You don't work for the devil?" "Nah, and I don't work for the man upstairs either, if that's what you're thinking. I'm kind of a mutual man when it comes to this sort of thing, and whoever offers me a better deal wins. At the moment, it's God. He offered me a good room. It's overlooking the pearly gates. 5-star accommodation. Charlie was confused by this, and when the goblin looked up at him, he laughed. You humans! You have one view of God, that He's almighty and powerful and answers all your prayers the moment He gets them. Well, I'll tell you what, the guy is nothing like that. He's kind of lazy, actually. He has this outlook that because He created the Earth and every other planet out there, He shouldn't have to do anything. Kind of pisses me off, actually, but anyway, moving on. The creature looked down at the page again. Okay, like I said before, first item on the agenda. Unfortunately, it's not that great. You have cancer. The mention of this took Charlie back some, and he had to ask, just to confirm. I have cancer? The old man felt the shock go through him. It felt almost like he was on a surgery table and the doctor was hitting him with the defibrillator. Yep, terminal. In about 6 months from now you'll be gone. Bang. Just like that. Your new friends will be the ones that you're joining up there. The goblin moved the pen off the page and into the air, bobbing it in an upward position twice. Although, I may not be there at that time, I tend to move around a lot, so if you do find yourself standing at the entrance, I wouldn't recommend you give them my name. Charlie repeated his previous words as the goblin got out of the chair, seeming to give his legs a stretch. He walked around the bookstore, picking up hardcovers off shelves and studying them. I have cancer. Another couple of times this sentence was heard in the bookstore, and on the 5th time, Derek turned. If the old man were to see the look in his eyes for that brief second, he would have come to the conclusion that the goblin wasn't anything but a trickster, a creature designed to torment those that he met with. But he didn't look, and so, the events rolled out the way Derek wanted them to. He put the book down and walked back to the desk. Listen man, I was sent here to tell you you have cancer, and to warn you about it. I'll admit that Gull was a bit of an idiot about that, but that's the way he is. There was a short pause. However, there might be something I can do for you. Charlie's eyes brightened with hope as he looked up at the goblin. Part 2. The box. What is it? Before I explain it to you, I'll have to go over what the thing is, and the price of using it. It's this box. A box? Yes, a box. A small black box. It's sentient. The way it works is, it scans your soul, gives you 2 random options on what it reads as your darkest secrets, the things that you do your best to hide from the outside world. It scans me? Yes, but there's something else you need to know. Once you choose to use it, there's no going back. You have to choose one of the options it gives you, even if the 2 options both result in an outcome you have no desire to make happen. Charlie stopped and thought for a moment before replying. So you're saying, once I decide that I'm using the box, there's no going back? Yes, using the box cures you of all illness, but a price for it is making the decision. If you don't make that decision, well, let's just say, when the box was brand new, it wasn't as heavy as it is nowadays. A long silence followed what Derek said, maybe half a minute. The old man wasn't sure, trying to decide whether to die of cancer or have a random decision affect him for the rest of his life. It was the one thing he never wanted to do. Meanwhile, the goblin took another stroll, this time stopping at one of the far shelves to the left of the store, picking up a copy of The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger and beginning to read it. By the time Charlie looked around to tell him the answer to what he was going to do, he was already halfway through the book. You know, this Holden Caulfield guy reminds me of this dude I used to know back in the 90s. The goblin looked up from the book and saw that Charlie was staring at him, waiting to tell him what he had decided to be his fate. Shutting the book, he made his way back to the desk and again sat down behind it. Well, what's it gonna be, Cancer Man? My box or their box? When you said the box is heavier than before, you meant that the box absorbs the soul of a person who changes their mind once they have said they want to use it? No shit, man, what do you think this is? Listen, I'll explain it to you in simple terms. It's like you're at a casino, playing blackjack. You're at 20, the dealer gives you an ace. Bingo! The dealer gives you the king, you lose. The box is like a game of blackjack. You could get the ace, or you could get the king. However, if you choose not to play the game once your chips are on the table, security comes to get you. But instead of kicking you out, they take you and put you in jail for eternity. So if I go back on my decision, the box takes my soul and locks it inside itself? Now you're getting it, Charlie boy! The creature leaned over the table and smacked the old man on the shoulder as if they were friends. So, what's the decision? I don't have all day, you know. I have to head over to Paul McCartney after this, see what he's doing. Charlie looked up at the mention of the Beatles bassist. Sorry, confidential. The Goblin shrugged and silence fell back over the shop. A few moments later, it was broken. Give me the box. I'd rather take my chances with the decisions than die in 6 months. And he chooses the box. Come right up, sir. Derek raised his hand, and in an instant there was a puff of smoke, and a black box appeared. Set right up, boys and girls. Witness the power of the mysterious black box. What wonders could it hold? What secrets does it possess? Come and see for yourself. The voice of the Goblin had changed into a similar voice to that of somebody you would find at a carnival, tempting people from all over to come and see what was so great about his stall. Sorry, the voice was regular now. I knew this dude who owned a circus once. They called him Elastic Jimmy. Could dislocate any bone in his body. Used to walk around like that chick out of The Exorcist. Nice guy. Disappeared without a trace, unfortunately. Quite sad. Anyway, back on track. He placed the box on the counter. It made a heavy metal sound, seeming as though it was a lot bigger than it sounded. Now place your hand on top of the box. The old man was hesitant. Come on, man, I've got it out and everything. Slowly, he outstretched his hand and placed it on the top of the object. It felt cold, like a metal that's been outside for years. A sharp feeling accompanied the cold. A feeling that would spring up if he happened to run the palm of his hand along a knife edge. Keep your hand there, keep your hand there. Charlie felt a slight stabbing pain and pulled his hand back quickly, grabbing hold of it with his other appendage. And that's the blood sample. Blood sample? Yeah, dude. How do you think it's going to be able to scan your soul? It needs some DNA first. Why does technology invented by gods need to take a blood sample? The Goblin laughed. This wasn't invented by gods, my friend. This thing? This was forged in the fires of hell. The look of the old man's face made the Goblin burst out laughing. Nah man, I'm just kidding with you. You can actually buy one of these things on the corner between 666th and Lucifer Street. Good price. Just takes your blood sample so it can identify who you are in the human race is all. I got a great deal on this one. Bought about half a century ago. Only cost me half a dozen souls. Why have you got a road named after the black market? Heaven has a black market. Every city has a black market. In fact, that reminds me, I gotta check how that bidding war is going on Hell Bay. Wait a second. Where do the items on the black market come from? Charlie's question was never answered. As he finished his sentence, a blue light exploded from the box, shooting straight down to light up his legs. It hovered there for a few seconds, then slowly began to move up his body, increasing and decreasing in diameter to match his figure. Once it got to his head, it went back down to his feet, and rose again shortly after. This repeated a few more times, and then the light decreased to the size of a laser pointer, and retracted back into the box. And that is it for the scanning procedure. Now we get to the exciting part. Derek smiled at the old man. He didn't smile back. Nothing happened for a couple of seconds. To Charlie it seemed like forever, and he was just about to ask the Goblin if it was meant to take as long as it was, when slowly, a red light that looked similar to that of neon illuminated round the edges of the box. It grew and intensified until it was right on the brink of causing the old man to shield his eyes from the glare, as not to hurt them. The intensity of the light stayed at that level, as if waiting for something else to happen before it could move on to its next stage. Then, all at once, the light faded, and the top of the box popped open to reveal a smoke that looked like a kind that dry ice would produce when in boiling water, and moments later, a small screen rose from the depths of the box. It looked like one of those TVs that would serve as a viewer for security cameras, big enough to hang on the wall, but small enough to rest on the desk. Without warning, it turned on. The screen was split into two sections. One had the title of Decision 1, while the other had the title of Decision 2. Here I come, Charlie boy. As the Goblin said his statement, two sentences faded into view, one in each column. Charlie's eyes grew wide as he read Decision 2 slowly, and the Goblin laughed as the reaction took place. Part 3. The Decision. Die in surgery, giving somebody my liver, or change the outcome of the human race forever? What kind of decisions are they? Charlie got up out of the chair and started walking around the bookstore, waving his hands around in the air and going on about how he could never make the decision he was faced with. Although, By the frailty of the man, he couldn't do it for very long, and soon enough all he was doing was yelling. All the while, the goblin sat there, watching him with a look of boredom on his face. When he had had enough of the old man talking to himself, the goblin spoke up, both out of annoyance and frustration. "If you don't make the decision soon, I'm gonna have to make it for you." At Derek's voice, Charlie stopped talking and turned around, facing the desk again. "You said it would be between two decisions. You didn't say I had to choose how the human race was going to turn out. What I said was, it will give you two random choices, and there is a choice you will win, or a chance you will lose. Just because you lost doesn't mean it's my fault." "You said you would help me." Charlie's words were cut off. "Listen, cockbite. You didn't want to die of cancer, so I gave you this option. You said yes to it. Now, there's no going back from this point on. So, here's what needs to be done. You need to decide what you want to do between those two decisions down there. If you don't, your soul is going to end up inside this box. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. My life keeps going. This is all you're doing, my friend. Now stop whining like a little bitch, sit down, and make your damn choice." The man sat down in the chair the goblin produced out of thin air and looked up at the screen and began thinking about what he was going to do next. This took longer than Derek had expected, so he spoke up, clearly seeing Charlie was having trouble with the decision. "Okay, buddy boy, time to help you out a bit. Which outcome of which decision do you want to see?" The old man looked up. "What? What do you want to see? I can show you the outcome of one decision. One decision only, though. Let's not get gritty and take the whole jar of cookies. Show me the outcome of the human race." Derek was surprised at the speed at which Charlie had made his decision. "That fast, huh? It's not hard when you know what's going to happen if you die in surgery." "Okay, if you say so, Charlie boy." The goblin raised his hand to touch the screen and closed his eyes. He looked as though he was channeling something, his face screwed up, and his eyes moved underneath the lids. Charlie waited, looking at the screen. A few moments later he saw what he thought looked like a feature film, but it was being played out much faster than he could take it in. All he really saw of the thing before it disappeared were people on the street, something being launched into space, and an explosion. The screen had flicked back to the decisions before he even had a chance to blink. What the hell was that? That was how the human race would end up if you chose that option. I could barely tell what was going on. Well, if I showed you the whole thing, we'd be here for years. I'd rather spend my time with somebody else if you don't mind. There was no response from Charlie, and once again the goblin grew impatient of the waiting. "Okay, this is it. You gotta make a decision now because I am officially running late for my next meeting. And so, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give you one more minute to decide what you wanna do. If you haven't decided in that minute, then I'm going to pick the one I like and you will just have to deal with the repercussions." Derek started counting down from 60 seconds. "Wait, hang on, I need more time." He ignored the old man. "Wait!" Still no response. Before long, the counter was down to 30 seconds and Charlie was frantically trying to find a way out of the obstacle before him. The counter continued down. 19, 18, 17, 16... By the time the creature was down to 10, the man thought he had no choice but to yell the only thing that came out of his mouth. So that's exactly what he did. "Outcome of the human race! I choose the outcome of the human race!" The goblin stopped counting, and a grin spread across his face. "The outcome of the human race, you say?" "Yes, the outcome of the human race. I want to change the way the human race will turn out. I don't want to die, and with this option it seems like I won't." "I see." The goblin's voice took on a humorous tone. "And is that your final decision, Charlie boy?" The next words were hesitant, but they were the words that he meant. "Yes, that is my final decision." "Okay then." Derek waved his hand over the top of the screen, and all at once it retracted back into the box, pieces breaking up into smaller parts so they could fit. When everything was back in the small space that the box provided, the top slammed shut, and once again it became just a black box, sitting on the desk. The goblin picked it up in his hands, and just as quick as it had come to be in his hand, it disappeared, the same puff of smoke appearing from nothing. "That's it, I'm afraid. Time for me to go. Places to be." Derek stood up from the chair and walked out from the desk. "That's it?" The old man turned in his chair as he said this, catching the goblin as he headed towards the door. "No telling me what to expect or anything? What to look out for in case I want to see what I did?" Derek stopped in his tracks and turned around to face the man. Silence hovered for a few seconds, then the creature burst out laughing. Charlie frowned. What's so funny? The goblin didn't answer the question, but instead dropped to his knees, then onto his back. Soon enough he was rolling around on his sides, holding his body from the aching. What's so funny? Tell me, damn it! Oh, you humans. You never learn anything, do you? The creature wiped away a tear and stood back up, leaning on a nearby bookshelf, getting his breath back. What's that meant to mean? You could have won, my friend. Oh, you could have taken on Broadway and the performance of your life, but instead, you chose the road that leads to nowhere. The car broke down and there's nobody for miles. Can you stop talking in riddles and just tell me what the hell is going on? It was a test! That's what the box is. It's a test of your humanity. What you are willing to do when faced with two complete opposites. Yes, you explained that at the start, but you didn't choose the right decision. What do you mean I didn't choose the right decision? It was my free will. One or the other. You said if I choose one of the decisions, I'll be cured. You said that that was a sacrifice for the cure. Choosing between two random things. I did say that, but that's not everything. Charlie felt a sting of anger rise up in him as he realized the goblin had tricked him on some level. Then what's the rest of it? My soul gets taken away, the cancer is gonna come back, what? Tell me, you ugly little shit! Ouch. It's not a very nice thing to call somebody who's just help you out. You know, you ought to learn to be more appreciative of people. Derek took a pause to laugh. If you had chosen the right decision, nothing would have happened to you. Everything would have been okay. You would have been cured of cancer and the human race would have just gone on living like they always do. Although, you are cured of cancer, so that's one thing. What? Finally realizing what the goblin was saying to him, the old man clenched his hand in a fist. If you had chosen the surgery, you would live through it. The test of good character failed. It seems you would rather let the world destroy itself than help someone out. You're a selfish human being, Charlie boy. You asshole. I know. I told you I was an asshole before. Weren't you listening? At the end of the goblin's sentence, Charlie moved as fast as he could towards the creature. But by the time he got there, Derek was ready with his hand raised in the air. He clicked his fingers and disappeared, leaving a puff of smoke in his wake. There was silence for a couple of seconds, and Charlie looked around the room, trying to see if the goblin was still there, waiting for any sign. He spun back around as he heard the voice behind him. Oh, and by the way, if you do want to find out what outcome it is, I highly recommend tuning into the news in about 9-10 months. Should have popped up on television by then. Anyway, I'll see you later. Once again the goblin clicked his fingers and vanished in the thin air. Charlie heard the sound behind him of the door opening and closing, but made no attempt to move towards it. He knew the goblin was gone, and there was no getting him back. The old man stood in silence for a long time, simply just looking at the wall behind the desk. Then slowly, he turned and walked towards the door, stopping in front of it. He reached up and grabbed the sign that was switched around to closed. At that moment, he did the only relevant thing that came to mind. He was at a loss for not only words, but for thought too, and he figured he may as well do what he did best. He turned the sign around on the door. Part 4. The Outcome. The tea sat steaming on the bench as Charlie made his way over to the fridge, opened it, and got out the milk. He then closed it, walked over to where the tea was, and poured the milk into the tea, stopping when he thought it was enough. He gave the tea a stir and put the milk back in the fridge. Soon enough, he was holding the mug in his hand and heading back to his lounge room, where the seat in front of the television was sitting idle. Removing the vacancy, he sat down. Reaching his hand out, he grabbed the remote that was sitting on the coffee table beside the chair, pointed at the TV, and pushed the power button. The screen came to life with the sound of a trailer for a movie. It ended, and some more advertisements played before the news came on. Charlie put his mug on the coffee table and leaned forward in his chair. The date was 20th of August, 2014. The Goblin had said to tune into the news around this time to see the changes he had made, and that's exactly what he was doing. All things that had been distracting him before stopped as the opening title for the news played, and the camera cut to the anchor.
Good evening, and welcome to Channel 27 News. Our stories this week include a man caught in a tree after climbing it drunk, a number of individuals reporting seeing a figure that has come to be known as the Rain Man, and the breakthrough in science that may have just jumped our technology forward.
Charlie's eyes were fixed on the screen, so much so that he didn't even flinch when he heard the voice behind him. "Turning in, Charlie boy. Well done. I didn't think you would remember. The old lump of meat in your head is getting old, you know. The old man didn't respond. Okay. Sorry about that. That was low. There was still silence, and seeing that he was clearly being ignored, the goblin shut his mouth and watched the news report.
The latest Ebola outbreak has now become more widespread. As a measure of trying to contain it, authorities have taken to shutting several borders. This includes Nigeria and Kenya. So far, the virus has claimed 1,350 lives, and well over 2,000 are suspected to be infected. We will
Charlie raised the controller and switched the screen off, then simply slumped back in his armchair. Silence fell over the room. Ebola. I gave the world Ebola. He turned his head, but the goblin had already disappeared, leaving him alone. He reached toward his tea and went to take another sip, but the mug fell out of his hand, crashing to the floor and smashing into a million pieces. Mr. Charlie Black was not good at making decisions.